Let's read our verses, and then we'll get right into this. So, out loud, our first verse, Psalm 107:20. Here we go. God gave the command, sent forth his word, and healed them. So they were saved, rescued from dying, destruction, or their pits. In Aaron's particular case, being saved from your pit would probably be a good thing there. And it still comes as a result of God sending forth his word. Mark 16:20. Here we go. And they went out and preached everywhere, while the Lord, Master, kept working right with them, confirming the message, proved that their preaching was true, validated the message with indisputable evidence by the attesting signs and miracles that were performed that closely accompanied it. Again, what goes forth first? The word. And all these things back up and support and work along with the word that was proclaimed. We want the signs and wonders, and we want all the stuff, but often we want to skip the word. It's scary to me. When you're out there doing stuff as spectacular as it might be, and you don't have the word behind you, or you're not standing in what the word can support, you're out in some dangerous territory. I'm not sure I want to be out there with you in those situations. Right. And we don't know the limits of those boundaries. So our box is a lot smaller than God's box is usually. But when you get outside of the boundaries into some stuff that the word can't back up, I don't know that I want to be there with you. That's some scary stuff. That's where some weird things start happening that you're like, oh, I don't know about that. Anyway, last one. Acts 4:29-31. And now, O Lord, hear their threats and give us, your servants, great boldness in preaching your word. Stretch out your hand with healing power. May miraculous signs and wonders be done through the name of your holy servant Jesus. After this prayer, the meeting place shook, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. Then they preached the word of God with boldness. I pray for that boldness. Fill us again, Holy Spirit, so that we're in boldness. We don't cower down. We don't back down. We proclaim your word, the truth, understand it boldly. Because it's only the people that are bold about it that get results. It's only the people that are bold about it that can really help. Because it has to arrest your thinking. It has to really almost like slap you in the face. What do you mean? You're very bold. God didn't give us any option about whether this is going to work or not whether this is going to work. He was very bold about it. So if we're going to be like him, we also got to be very bold about it. And then we can expect the same results. Let's review just a little bit. We talked about the leper. Some verses there. Believing that God can is not the same thing as believing that he will. Lesson 2, Peter's mother-in-law. Jesus rebuked the fever directly, and he expects us to talk to our symptoms, talk to our bodies directly. Lesson 3, the man born by 4. Faith expects. Faith is determined and persistent. Faith works best in condemnation. Forgiveness of sin and healing are equally easy for God and should be equally easy for us to receive as well. The nobleman's son. The life of faith requires that we believe just because Jesus said so without any other evidence and then act on what we think we believe. Lesson 5, the man with the withered hand. God will never tell you to do something you can't do. Often you think you can't do it, but when you reach the end of what you actually can do, you meet the power of God. God demands the action of faith. And then last week we talked about the centurion servant. Some details about that. The initiation, the centurion's representatives actually were the ones that approached Jesus. So it was proxy faith. Was faith mentioned? Yes. Jesus marveled at it. One of the few times Jesus actually marveled about somebody's faith. Was faith evidenced? Absolutely. He required nothing else than for Jesus to say the word to his representatives. He didn't have to hear it himself. And that was enough. Delegated authority is very real. Jesus delegated his authority to us. Because he understood authority, the centurion only required that Jesus speak the word and the sick be healed. And I think we probably need a better understanding of it. We probably need to explore that a little more deeply. So our tally sheet right now, we've covered 6. Initiation, we've got 1 for individual, 1 for their faith, 3 for proxy faith. So 5 out of the 6, if you add all those together, the person or the person's representatives started the process. They weren't waiting on Jesus to start the process. They did it themselves. And the Holy Spirit instigated one of these healings. Was faith mentioned twice? Yes. 4 times no. Was faith evidenced? 5 times yes. 1 time no. So what's the sum of this mean? What does all this say? You can initiate your own healing, and faith is almost going to be always required. Does that make sense? All right, today, lesson 7, the daughter of Jairus. The daughter of Jairus. Now, some people refer to this as Jairus' daughter, but it gets possessive, it gets really interesting to try and type. So I said food with it. The daughter of Jairus. Notice these passages are a little longer. There's some gaps in them. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But there's another story in the midst of this story. So we're not talking about that one today. So we're doing the first part, skipping down to the second part. Here we go. Matthew 9, 18 through 19, and we'll skip down to 23 through 26. While he was saying these things to them, a ruler, a synagogue official, entered the house and kneeled down and worshipped him, saying, "My daughter has just now died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." Jesus got up and began to accompany the ruler with his disciples. Now, the story that happens in the middle of this is the woman with the issue of blood. So Jairus comes to Jesus. Jesus starts heading his direction, and he's interrupted by the woman with the issue of blood. So that whole account takes place in the verses that we're skipping. We'll cover her another day. It's not that I'm ignoring her, but I don't have time to do them both in the same day. We'll deal with that one on another day. Verse 18, very, very positive. Faith will tell you ahead of time what is going to happen. Do you see him not saying, well, God, maybe you could do this. God, maybe if you could help me out, that'd be wonderful. God, it would sure be nice if it worked out this way. None of that's faith. Faith tells you in advance what the outcome of this situation is going to be. In this particular case, come lay your hand on her, and the outcome, she will live. No question about it. No, if it be your will about it. No, it could happen this way about it. No, we'll just see what happens about it. What does faith actually declare? The end, the outcome. She will live. She will live. Very positive, very faith-filled statement he makes here. And Jesus didn't have to be persuaded. He just went up and began to go with Jairus. Took his disciples with them. Keep that in mind. He took the disciples with him to Jairus' house. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. Okay, drop down to the other portion of this same passage, verse 23. When Jesus came to the ruler's house and saw the flute players, who were professional hired mourners, and the grieving crowd making an uproar, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed and jeered at him. When the crowd had been sent outside, Jesus went in, took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the news about this spread throughout all of that district. Notice the uproar in verse 23. These professional mourners had already arrived at the scene. Now, what a job would that be? You're being paid to be grieving and mournful and in this uproar and this tumult at people's death. I don't know why I would be, if I was the person in the family, I don't know why I would pay somebody else to increase the grief in the room.
I would not be surprised if that's not still a thing. I think people don't. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I used to be in the floral business, so I did a lot of funerals, and it just wouldn't surprise me. People did have that just for their own ego or something.
Where's that based on? I mean, what's the basis for that? Why are you trying to add grief?
Oh, the grieving that you have, I guess.
So you're trying to show everybody else how mournful you are.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it would be a.
So it's a pride thing.
Yeah. Sorry.
So no, you're fine. So you're adding grief and pride together in a situation, and neither one of those are helpful in that situation. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Uproar, noise, does not equal faith necessarily. You'll notice that the people making the loudest noise in this particular case were the ones that had the least faith about what was going on. So just because somebody gets loud doesn't mean they're in faith. Several years ago, when I was just new to this, I was at some sort of meeting, some sort of service at the denomination church that I had gone to briefly. And at the end of this meeting, it came like a free prayer meeting or something. And people were praying kind of at their seats. And then they started coming up to the minister one at a time and asking him to pray with them about something. Well, the guy would typically do it with a microphone, just pray over that situation. Well, the people started talking. They got kind of disinterested after a few minutes had passed and they were done. So they were being reverent and quiet. They wasn't raising a big fuss about it, but they weren't really paying attention to what was going on up front. Anyway, as this went on and on and on, somebody came up and said, my aunt, somebody, has, and immediately, and I was amazed as I noticed immediately, everybody got loud when they started praying for this person. I thought, that's odd. I didn't know what was going on at the time. But later, I came to understand that what was happening is they were intimidated by the cancer, and they thought that them praying louder would make their prayers more authoritative. So they were trying to compensate for their lack of actual faith in the authority of the name of Jesus against something as formidable as cancer by being loud about it. And I thought, that's really an interesting way to try and cover that up. Jesus said to the Pharisees, you think you're going to be heard because of your much speaking. So praying over and over and over, praying the same thing over and over and over, and then trying to do it with volume. You're trying to stir yourself up and convince yourself, yeah, I'm really in faith about this. And it's really an act. It's really a scheme. Now, I'm not saying there's not a time when the Holy Spirit on the inside of you will just rise up and you get fired up about something. But you can tell the difference between when it's legitimate and you just feel the need to be louder versus when the loudness is trying to compensate for your intimidation of whatever it is you're praying about. Does that all make sense? It was just weird that I noticed it that particular evening, and it really stuck with me. And then I've been thinking about it over and over and over again about what actually happened there. And then it finally occurred to me, okay, they were intimidated by that, and they tried to compensate by being loud. So the loud person isn't always the one that's in faith. That's not 100% true all the time, but just because somebody's being loud about something does not mean they believe any more intently than anybody else does. In fact, it could mean the opposite. It could mean they're more afraid than somebody else. Anyway, that aside, I want to show you something here, and then we will talk about it, but it pertains to what we're going to be talking about today. Isaiah 45:11. Isaiah 45:11. The Lord is the Holy One of Israel and its maker. He says this, you ask me about what will happen. You question me about my children. And this last line, I want to focus on. You give me orders about what I have made. You, my people, my creation, give me orders about what I have made. Now, some of the versions indicate that God's saying you shouldn't be doing this, that who are you to challenge me? Who are you to, as my creation, to tell me what to do? But this version kind of words it a little differently. You give me orders about what I have made. I'm asking you to give me orders about what I have made. Do we really have that much clout with God? I'm going to make this statement. If you say what God said, he will do what you say. If you say what God said, he will do what you say. One more time. If you say what God said, then he will do what you say. So is there a sense in which you can command God concerning the works of his hands? Absolutely. But what's the prerequisite? That you are saying what he already said. So what are you doing? You're getting in agreement with what he already said. And then he's bound by his word. So you are giving him, and an order might not be the right word, but you're directing what he needs to do because he is in agreement with what you were saying because you are in agreement with what he said. If you say what God has already said over yourself in your life, it gives him a legal right to do it for you. He's not obligated to do everything you say, but he is obligated to do everything that you say when you say what he said. You can say some messed up stuff sometimes. We probably all have. Things that are not godly, things that are not biblical, things that are not his will. Is he under obligation to do those things for you? You probably don't really want him to do those things for you. But once you agree with him, once you agree with his word, what he has already said, and you say it, what comes next? You've given him a legal right to do what you just said in your life. You've given him the legal right and the positional relationship where you can command him concerning the works of his hands.
Say that again. Once you agree
with what God said, then he's not going to oppose what you just said because you're in agreement with him. He's legally obligated to do what you just said. So in a sense, you get to command him, hey there, you're fine. Glad to have you. You get to command him concerning his word when you have said what he says. Not when you're talking on your own. And some people mess that up. They think, well, I can say whatever I want to, and he's got to back me up. No, he doesn't. Where's that verse at? Jesus had already said that Jairus had already said that this girl would live. He is agreeing with Jesus' position about this scenario. He'd already said it. Now what happens next? Jesus can do what he said because Jairus had already agreed with what he said. Jesus works with our words to give him legal right to do things in our lives. If you say what God said, he will do what you say. All right, let's see the end of this in a different version. Matthew 9, 23 through 26. By now they had arrived at the house of the town official and pushed their way through the gossips looking for a story and the neighbors bringing casseroles. I like the way that's worded. That's funny to me. Push through all this mess of people that are there for entirely the wrong reasons. What does this version say they're there for? To get a story to gossip about and to bring the casseroles. They're more concerned about eating than they are what's going on in the family. Jesus was abrupt. Clear out. This girl isn't dead. She's sleeping. They told him he didn't know what he was talking about. But when Jesus had gotten rid of the crowd, he went in, took the girl's hand, pulled her to her feet alive. The news soon went out, traveled throughout the region. Let's read this from Luke. Maybe we'll see some different things in Luke. Luke 8, 41 through 42, and then also 49 through 46. Luke 8, 41 through 42, and then also 49 through 46. There came a man named Jairus, who had for a long time been a director of the synagogue. And falling at the feet of Jesus, he begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed together around him, almost suffocating him. Drop down to the rest of the story. We're skipping again the one with the issue of blood and coming back to Jairus' story. Verse 49. When he was still speaking, a man from the house of the director of the synagogue came and said to Jairus, "Your daughter is dead. Do not weary or trouble the teacher any further." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not be seized with alarm or struck with fear. Simply believe in me as able to do this. She shall be made well. And when he came to the house, he permitted no one to enter in with him except Peter and John and James, the girl's father and mother. And all were weeping for and bewailing her. But he said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed him to scorn, knowing full well that she was dead. And grasping her hand, he called, saying, child, arise from the sleep of death. And her spirit returned from death. She arose immediately, and he directed that she should be given something to eat. Her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had occurred. The group that got left outside was a fickle bunch. One minute they're howling and weeping, and the next minute they're laughing hysterically. You see how this faithless bunch goes from one ditch to the other ditch, one side to the other side. We do that in Christianity too, but this group in particular is very clear. In a matter of seconds, they went all the way over here to all the way over here. At least when we do it in religion and in Christianity, it takes us a few years to move from one ditch to the other ditch. But this group went there immediately. Fickle, nothing solid, nothing concrete, back and forth, wavering up and down, nothing at all about them that's helpful in this situation. No stability, no consistency. They were completely driven by their emotions. You see how in these situations, your emotions probably aren't your friend. Yeah, they're there God gave you your emotions for a certain reason, but they're probably not your friend when it comes to believing, because we tend to trust them. We tend to put more confidence in them than they're supposed to have. There's supposed to be a way that which we connect to the world around us, but they're not supposed to be the source of our information. Well, I feel this way, so I'm going to act like it. Your emotions can change. They're fickle. They can move very quickly, very suddenly. They're not the basis for you to be stable, for you to be constant. Were we sure the girl was dead? Verse 55 says that her spirit returned. My question is, when do you actually die? You die when your spirit leaves your body. She died when her spirit left. So her spirit had to return. She came back to life when that spirit returned. Okay, verse 22. Let's look at that just a minute. This is from Mark. I'm sorry. I'm changing passages again. Mark 5:22. Just then a man saw it was Jesus. So he pushed through the crowd and threw himself down at his feet. His name was Jairus, a Jewish official who was in charge of the synagogue. So what do we know about Jairus? Who was he? How does the story tie together? Let's read one more version here, and then we'll talk about it in just a second. Mark 5:22-24. One of the meeting place leaders named Jairus came. When he saw Jesus, he fell to his knees beside himself as he begged. My dear daughter is at death's door. Come lay your hands on her so she will get well and live. Jesus went with him, the whole crowd tagging along, pushing and jostling him. So Jairus was the leader, ruler, overseer, supervisor, or president of the local church. Now, he wasn't a spiritual person. He wasn't in charge of the spiritual affairs of the church. He was more like the administrator of the church, making sure that all the services are coordinated, that resources are there, the lights are on. I know they didn't have lights, but that's kind of the point. More of the administration side of things rather than the spiritual side of things. However, Jesus taught in this synagogue frequently. So Jairus knew who Jesus was. And I find it very interesting that Jairus even had to push through a crowd around Jesus to get to Jesus to start this whole process. You're fine. Did it matter how Jairus approached him? It does, actually. Do you see the humility? He came and fell at Jesus' feet, begging him, praying him, here, come help my daughter. Come with me and help my daughter. He could have approached him by saying, look, you know who I am. I have a right for you to do this because I let you preach at my church. I dare say that had he come in that attitude, this story might not even be in the Bible. Jesus requires that we come to him in humility. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So if you want anything from God, it's not about you at all. It's about, God, I'm getting out of the way here. I don't deserve this, but I'm asking for mercy. I'm a nobody in this thing, and yet you still love me anyway. So this is all about you, and I'm going to ask you, out of your mercy, out of your goodness, out of your grace, to help me in this situation, even though I don't deserve it. Jairus did not even mention who he was, his references, his credentials. Now, Jesus probably knew who he was. I mean, he had spoken at that synagogue a few times, if not more than that. So they probably knew who each other, that didn't need to be stated, but he still didn't throw any of that in Jesus' face. He came to him, fell on his face, begged, and prayed, besought him to come heal his daughter. So your approach to Jesus matters. Your approach to God matters. It's never about what you have earned, because all that really any of us have ever earned is hell. Everything beyond hell is a gift of God. And we've got to view it that way. We've got to treat it that way. So Jairus' actions did show humility. Jairus did not come up to Jesus saying or inferring, implying that he was more important, less important. Look, Jesus, in this situation, you're in charge. I'm falling at your face, whatever you would like to do. However you would like to approach this, this is your show. Please come help me. 23b from the Voice. Please come to my house. Just place your hands on her. I know that if you do, she will live. If you come to my house and place your hands on her, I know that she will live. It's an amazing faith statement. Are there any conditions on this? Other than you come, you place your hands on her, and the end result is she will live. Just keep that in mind. Drop down, 5:35, Mark 5:35. While he was talking to her, messengers arrived from Jairus' home with the news that it was too late. His daughter was dead, and there was no point in Jesus coming now. Don't bother him anymore. There's no point. It's over. Your daughter's dead. Okay, Jairus' statement, go back to it. If you touch her, she will live. Does that even eliminate the possibility of her dying temporarily and then coming back? I'm sure that's not what he had in his mind, but that's not what he said. He said, if you touch her, she will live. Doesn't matter if she's alive, doesn't matter if she's close to death, doesn't matter if she's dead. If you touch her, she will live. So that's what he's operating under. If you touch her, she will live.
But didn't he kind of get discouraged after he found out she died?
That's what we're about to talk about. Well, he had the opportunity to get discouraged. He didn't actually do it. He did a good job of holding it together. That's where we're about to go. It's that he had a choice to make, because this situation had not turned out like he thought it was going to, but yet what he said originally that started this whole process is still very alive, very active, even though it took kind of a detour from what he had in his mind. The Passion. Before he'd finished speaking, people arrived from Jairus' house, pushed through the crowd to give Jairus the news. There's no need to trouble the master any longer. Your daughter died. Remember, we skipped a few verses while Jesus healed the woman with the issue of blood. So would Jairus, now remember, at the beginning of the story, he says, come, touch my daughter, and she will live. At that point, according to these last two versions, she hadn't died yet. Matthew doesn't take account the first part of the story, so she had already died when Jairus approached. Anyway, I think the story went more like Luke and Mark. He started the process, he got interrupted, and then he finished the process. So while he's dealing with the woman with the issue of blood, you see that Jairus would have the opportunity to get offended here?
When you get to my house.
Yes. Look, Jesus, we don't have time to mess with her. Fix her later. My thing is very time sensitive. My thing is very important. She's had that condition 18 years. Yeah, it's an inconvenience for her. I'm sorry for her, but we'll deal with that later. Right now, you've got to get to my house quick. So he had an opportunity while this lady is being healed and Jesus' minister to get offended at the fact that this is taking some time. Precious time that his daughter doesn't really have. He did not get offended. Kudos to him, even though he had the opportunity to do so. Could he have also gotten offended at Jesus? Look, dude, you should realize how important it is that you get here quickly. And we don't have time to be wasting with you helping this woman. So he could have gotten offended at the woman or at Jesus, or both, for the delay that prompted him to not be at his house when his daughter died. That's the first thing to take account. Would offense have helped in that situation? It would have probably stopped the whole thing. It probably would have ended the whole thing right there. Why? Faith works by love. You can't be in love while you're offended at somebody. So him not being in love would have stopped faith from working. The process would have probably been halted at that point. Or he would have had to have dealt with the offense before they could move forward. But he didn't get offended. Kudos to him. Okay, I want to identify this report that Jairus just received. Your daughter's dead. Don't bother the master anymore. I want to call that the evil report. The evil report. It sounds like it's over. You just need to give up and quit. Have you ever had an evil report given to you before? What were your options? Well, fool, with all this, why even bother? That religion stuff is just dumb. All that time I've spent with God is just a waste. All that stuff I've given, all that stuff I've done, all that stuff I've read, doesn't matter, doesn't count. That's what typically is our choice when we get the evil report. Now, if you believe the evil report, what happens? Everything that you did ahead of time, you can just eliminate it. Right. You need to give up and quit. Faith comes by hearing the word of God. In contrast, fear comes by hearing any other report. Faith comes by hearing the word of God. Fear comes by hearing and giving attention to and yielding to any other report. It is up to you which report you decide to act on, to speak, and to believe. You have that choice. Now, I'm going to say this, and I don't want anybody to get bent out of shape about it. It's just something that I've noticed, and I've really noticed it this week as I'm preparing for this, so I've got to make some adjustments in my life too. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and say, I'm going in for a checkup. Would you agree with me that I get a good report? I'm going to go to the doctor. They're going to run a test on me. Would you agree with me that I'm going to get a good report? Have you ever heard that conversation? Have you ever seen that conversation? Y'all never been asked to agree with that? Yes? Okay. It's very common. People do that, especially if they perceive you to be a person of prayer, a spiritual person. They're going to the doctor. They want you to agree that the report that the doctor gives them comes back good. I know what they mean when they say that, and I'm not bent out of shape about it, but what really is happening there is they are misplacing their faith. Let me tell you why they're misplacing their faith. The first thing is they could make a mistake so you end up with a good report. Did that really help you any? If they make a mistake and the mistake ends up saying you have a good report, but it actually wasn't a good report because they made a mistake. Is that possible? A bigger problem is you're in suspense while you're waiting on the results of that test. Am I going to be healed? Am I going to be well, or am I not? Am I going to have an issue? Is my life in danger? Is my life good? Am I going to get to live? Am I not going to get to live? Am I going to get to be healthy? Am I not going to get to be healthy? All of these things are up in suspense until you get that piece of paper back in your mind. Do you see how that's a problem? It's not faith at all. Well, it is, but it's misplaced because your faith is in that piece of paper that comes back from the doctor, which they could have made a mistake on. Where's our faith supposed to be? What report are we supposed to be believing? That it's already done, regardless of what that test comes back. Do you see how that's kind of an issue? Well, of course I want the report to be good. I'd rather it be good than not be good. But even if it's not, is my world going to get rocked? You're correct. And that's the place where we've got to be about this thing. That we've got to get to the place, it doesn't matter what that report says. How can I say that? We already have the only report that we need. Let's read that report. Isaiah 53, 1 through 5. Isaiah 53, 1 through 5. Indeed, who would ever believe it? Who would possibly accept what we've been told? Who has witnessed the awesome power and plan of the eternal action? Now, other versions of this, who has believed our report? is how this starts in other versions. So he's about to give you the report. He's asking the question, who has believed this report that we're about to give? Out of emptiness he came, like a tender shoot from a rock-hard ground. He didn't look like anything or anyone of consequence. He had no physical beauty to attract our attention. So he was despised and forsaken by men, this man of suffering, grief's patient friend. As if he were a person to avoid, we looked the other way. He was despised, forsaken. We took no notice of him. Yet it was our suffering he carried, our pain and our distress, our sick to the soulness. We just figured that God had rejected him, that God was the reason he hurt so badly. But he was hurt because of us. He suffered so. Our wrongdoings wounded and crushed him. He endured the breaking that made us whole. The injuries he suffered became our healing. That's the report. And it doesn't matter what the doctor's report says. This is the report that you've got to believe. Who has believed our report? Or are you more confident in what this other piece of paper says? And the trick is, if these two don't match, if that doesn't match what the doctor says, if you stick with this, those two will end up matching. It's just going to take a matter of time. They will end up matching so long as you stick with that and don't let your faith or your fear be influenced by this other one. We already have the results. Jesus already passed the test for us. It doesn't matter what that doctor's report comes back with. Our results are already in. Our results are already here. Jesus already passed it. Jesus already finished it. Don't fall off the faith wagon if the natural report disagrees with God's report. Don't fall off the faith wagon. If the report that you just got disagrees with God's report, what that's telling me is, where's your faith at? In which report do you place your trust? Which one's got to change to match the other? The New Testament version of that is 1 Peter 2:24. 1 Peter 2:24. Christ in his own body took the wrong things that we have done on the cross. He did this so that we would stop our bad ways and live right. And then the last part, because he was punished, you were healed. Because he was punished, you were healed. This verse, our report, if you lay that verse out on your desk, before you get the doctor's test back, it'll say the exact same thing as it does after that doctor's test comes back. It's not going to change. Regardless of whether that doctor's report is good, bad, or inconclusive. This report doesn't change. So, should that doctor's report change your opinion? It should have no influence. Okay, we might have to be in a fight here for a little while to make that report match this one. But ultimately, this report is going to be the one that transpires. This report is going to be the way that it ends up going. If I'm willing to stand there long enough and endure it and go through it and keep my faith and keep speaking what I need to keep speaking. I heard about a guy whose natural report never agreed with God's report, and it didn't matter. This guy lives a normal life without any issues. He goes to the doctor every so often for a checkup. Every time he goes, the test is like saying he has a big heart. I mean, a literal hole heart. Every time he goes, but he's not having any problems. So what's going on here? God's doing a continual miracle in his heart. He's filled that hole with liquid glory or something that test can't pick up. So the test still shows he's got a hole in his heart. Does it matter to him if his life's going fine that report never matches this report? Makes no difference. Why do we place such emphasis on that other report? Why does it carry so much weight? Why does it carry so much authority in our lives? Okay, drop down a little bit in our passage in Mark. Mark 5:36. And now we're getting into the meat of this. Sure.
You said, why does the other report affect us way more than God? My opinion, I think it's because it's in your face. The result. So, of course, trying to get discouraged. Of course, I'm not hearing like you got stage 3 cancer and 6 months to live. That's kind of bit much for a person to handle. Of course, you kind of force split. If you a person that's fake, of course you kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna die. That's just where I'm gonna go with it. Then of course you kind of get back. Well, that's me. I get back and I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna die.
Right.
If God said I'm
Right.
not.
But
It's easy to go to.
I'm not saying you're not going to be shocked by that
Yeah.
report. I'm not saying you're not going to have to deal with possible fear, with possible whatever as a result of this report showing up. I'm not saying you're going to be unmoved. But ultimately, after you've had the time to gather yourself a minute and think, you conclude, okay, that report doesn't really matter. That means my life's going to be different for the next 6 months, 8 months, 2 years, however long it takes. I'm going to do things differently, but I'm still going to live. I'm still going to come through this. I'm still going to exist. I'm still going to survive. All right, Mark 5:36. They come to him after he's on his way. He deals with the woman with the issue of blood. So now the next messengers come to him and say, look, don't bother anymore. Your daughter's dead. Let's read. Overhearing, but ignoring what they said. Overhearing, but ignoring what they said. Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not be seized with alarm and struck with fear. Only keep on believing. Only keep on believing. Only keep on believing. The Darby says, but Jesus immediately, having heard the word spoken, says to the ruler of the synagogue, fear not, only believe. Fear not, only believe. Some more versions of this. Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, do not be afraid, just have faith. Disregarding, ignoring. So did Jesus take that report seriously? He knew what they had said. He knew what it meant. But in his mind, that was not the final report. It would be the final report if Jairus chooses to act on it. It would be the final report if Jairus chooses what he already said and replaces it with something else. Jesus refused to listen to what we're told and said to the official, don't yield to fear. All you need to do is keep on believing. As soon as Jesus heard this report, he addressed Jairus. Why would he say that so strong and so fast? This whole thing can mess this up eternally right now. He is at the crux. He is at the critical decision point right now. He just got the evil report, and Jairus has a choice to make. Jairus has an opportunity to get into fear and let go of his faith. Think about this for a second. If Jesus was capable of getting this done without Jairus' belief, why did Jesus jump on this so fast? We've got this mistaken idea about Jesus that he can just do whatever he wanted. He has to work with people's faith. He doesn't just go override. He has to work with people's faith. So if Jairus changes the direction of this conversation in this moment, Jesus is left limited in what he has to work with, or eliminated from what he has to work with. Do you see this? Jairus, keep your eyes right here. Right here, buddy. Don't look to the left. Don't look to the right. Don't look at these distractions. Right here. How did you start this thing? If you come touch my daughter, she will live. That's what you said to me. I'm heading that way now. Yeah, we got interrupted. Sorry about that. Got interrupted. I'm still going to her. And you said, if I touch her, we'll live. Is what you said still intact? Yes. He didn't envision her dying in the middle of that, I don't think. But what he said was still true. If you touch her, she will live. I'm on my way to do that very thing. Stay here. Stay with me. Don't change your confession now. Don't change your belief now. Don't change your opinion now. Don't change the thing that started this whole process. Don't change your words. Stay with me. Stay focused. Don't get your eyes on this. Don't be afraid. Only believe. Here's where the battle's won or lost. Only believe. Only believe. All things are possible. Only believe. It's not just believe. You hear the difference between just believe or only believe. Just believe says, I am believing a little bit, I'm doubting a little bit, and as long as my faith scale is higher than my fear scale, we'll pull this out. You don't have that option. You don't have an option to put this on the scale and see which one of them is heavier. Only believe. There's not a choice. It's not, I've got to have more than this. It's, I've got to have all of this and none of this. Only believe. Not just believe. If Jesus operated as many people believe that he did, this conversation would have gone much differently. Oh, Jairus, I know you just got bad news. You just go right ahead and cry, get it all out. I'm the Son of God. I'm going right with you, and we're going to fix this whole mess. Did Jesus do that? He couldn't do that. That's a misconception. He could not override the spiritual laws that were in place. He had to have Jairus' help in the matter. He had to have Jairus' words. He had to have Jairus' faith, Jairus' belief to even make this happen. Only believe. Fear is gripping this guy, trying to come on him. Put yourself in his spot. They just sent you the report that said your daughter died. Don't bother the master anymore. What's your reaction? What's your inclination? You're about to lose it. Jesus jumps right. Hey, right here, only believe. Don't gate what we've already started. Don't limit what I'm able to do here. Only believe. Don't yield to that fear. Don't give voice to that fear. Only believe.
It's awesome how you're saying he has to abide by the spiritual laws of his place. Even though he has to abide by those, he's taking the highest as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But he's still got to have Jairus with him.
Exactly. Yeah.
He can't just go in and override whatever's going on. He has to work with Jairus. Jairus is the one giving him permission.
Exactly. Yeah, he's leading them through that.
And that's why we're talking about this. I want to be able to lead you through the process of receiving healing. I want you to be able to lead the next person through the process of receiving healing. So you've got to step into Jesus' shoes on this and say, only believe here. I know you just got a bad report. I know you've got a distraction. I know you've got possibility of looking whichever way. Only believe. Keep it right here. Keep the process that you put in motion in place because you're not going to change it now. Or my hands are tied.
Especially with the lady, I'm like, come on.
In the middle of the night, let's say you wake up and you have some alarming systems. Your chest is just beating. Your heart's just beating really strangely in your chest, and things are just not right. You feel like, oh, what is going on? What's the first thought that comes to your mind? You're having a heart attack. You're going to die. Am I really going to die from a heart attack? Don't you dare say it. It's a good way to die. Do you see that you have the choice to yield to that fear at the moment? Has the thing ever happened to you? Are you actually having a heart attack? Probably not. It's probably heartburn or indigestion or one of those things. Now, there will be times that the Holy Spirit's saying, okay, you're having a heart attack, deal with this. You still don't deal with the fear of it. You start speaking the word about that thing. Okay, you don't buy the heart attack. What happens next? Oh, you've got cancer. And you don't buy the cancer, okay? What you've got severe acid reflux. No. What's he keep doing? He keeps going down the list until you bite on one of them. Until you take the bait on one of them. Until he finds something that you will fear. And when I say fear, what's happening there? Until you find one of these things on this list that you believe has the power to kill you, the power to harm you. And then you give voice to it. And then what can he do? Do whatever you say. We talked earlier. If you say what God said, God will do what you say. It works in reverse. If you say what the devil said, the devil will do what you said. Because you gave him legal right to do it. Mm-hmm. You've seen that cartoon, and it's really true. The cartoon with the angel on one side and the devil on the other side, and they're both whispering in your ear at the moment. Out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. You got one witness, you got a different witness. Who makes the deciding vote? Whichever thing you say, whichever side you agree with is the way that it is. Because they outnumber the other voice 2 to 1. When these people show up with this evil report, fear was trying to seize Jairus. Banging on the door, knocking on the door. This thing would be over if Jairus answers that door. If he yields to that fear, it's over. It is done. There's nothing that can be changed, nothing can be fixed about it. So how important is it what you yield to? Now, did I say you wouldn't feel afraid? I didn't say that at all. Does it matter what you feel? I'm not moved by what I feel. I'm not moved by what I see. I'm moved only by what I believe. And I choose to believe only the report of the Lord. So in that moment, are you going to be fear-free? I doubt it. It's entirely possible that your knees are going to be knocking so loud that they're the whole percussion section in the orchestra. Goosebumps double parked on your arms, your hair sticking straight up on the back of your neck. Well, that'd be a bigger miracle. I know that song. But just because you feel afraid, just because there are symptoms of fear, do you have to yield to it? And then if you don't yield to it, what's the next thing the devil says? What do you mean you're not going to yield to fear? I hear your knees knocking clear over here. You're obviously afraid. You're like, yeah, I'm terrified. But I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of giving you my words. I'm not going to yield to the fear that I'm feeling. I'm going to yield only to my faith, to my belief, to the report that you've already given me about the situation. The report, even though I just got a new report that says something different, my report hasn't changed. The thing that I put my confidence in, the thing that I put my trust in has not changed, even though a new report has been introduced. And I've got to rest myself, I've got to calm myself, I've got to center myself and realize, okay, I've got this new information and it's bad and I want to be afraid about it. My report, the thing that I have put my life on, has not changed. And I'm not going to yield. I'm going to do it afraid if I have to do it afraid, but I am not going to yield to the fear in this situation. You see how it's all hanging in the balance right here. And Jairus is getting to choose which way this thing is going to end up turning out, whether or not he yields to the fear or not. Verse 35 to 43 from the voice. While he was speaking, some members of Jairus' household pushed through the crowd. Jairus' servants, your daughter's dead. There's no need to drag the teacher any further. Jesus overheard their words. Then he turned to look at Jairus. All right, don't be afraid. Just believe. Jesus asked everyone but Peter, James, and John, James' brother, to remain outside when they reached Jairus' home. Inside the synagogue leader's house, the mourning had already begun. The weeping and the wailing cried out into the street. Jesus and his 3 disciples went inside. Why are you making all this sorrowful noise? The child isn't dead. She's just sleeping. The mourners laughed a horrible, bitter laugh and then went back to their wailing. Jesus cleared the house so that only his 3 disciples, Jairus and Jairus' wife, were left inside with him. They all went to where the child lay. Then he took the child's hand. Jesus, little girl, it's time to wake up. Immediately, the 12-year-old girl opened her eyes, arose, and began to walk. Her parents could not believe their eyes. Jesus to the parents, don't tell anybody what you've just seen. Why don't you give her something to eat? I know she's hungry. Okay, what happened here? Jairus passed the test. He didn't yield to the fear, so they get ahead and get to the house. Now you get to the house, and you got all this commotion going on. All these people that think they're helping that are not increasing the environment of faith at all. And Jesus says, all of you out. All of you out. Now, imagine you're Jairus, because in that room you have Aunt Minnie and Reverend Jones and Uncle Bob and your dear old long family friend Billy. You've got all these well-meaning people who are not there contributing faith to the situation. Are you willing to cast them out? Most of us say, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, so I'm just going to let them stay. Now think about the importance of the situation. If anybody was able to just wade through all that mess, go in there and get the job done, it would have been Jesus. And yet he found it necessary to kick all these idiots out of the house. They didn't have any faith. And he's limited by the faith in the environment as to what he can do. So when you are in the situation and there are people clamoring for your attention, well-meaning people, good people, but they don't bring any faith at all to the table, are you willing to risk leaving them in that situation just so you don't ruffle any feathers? If Jesus had to kick them out to get this thing done, what makes you think you're going to be able to do it with any less? As it gets more serious, as it gets more real, you need to be more selective about who you talk to about it, about who is involved, about who remains in that situation, about who speaks into that situation. As it gets more and more real, as it gets more and more serious, you need to start shrinking your circle down to only the people that are, first of all, not hindering the environment, and ideally, they're at least as expectant and as full of faith and are certain that it's God's will to fix this thing as you are, and hopefully more so. But we are too focused on the fact that I don't want to ruffle any feathers here. Well, if you don't fix this now, if you don't kick them out now, there might not be any feathers to deal with later. So-and-so might die. At least this way, there'll be somebody to fix the feathers with when you're done. This is serious. This is life and death. You need to be very selective as it comes down to crunch time about who you're talking to. Do what? They do. That's their gift in life, if you want to call it that. They want to make sure that they're miserable already, and they want as many people to join them in their company as possible. Does any of that help you in this situation? And do we normally view it that seriously? We don't. This is life or death, and we need to treat it as such. We need to consider it. Right. Right. And I'm not saying be hard and ignore your emotions or be rude or difficult about this. I'm just saying, look, I don't have time to deal with teaching you what's going on right here. We're down to it. I need you to leave right now, and I'll tell you what happened after we're done. I'll tell you I'll teach you, and I'll spend time with you, and we'll do something after I'm finished.
I think that's changing my life was, I was a user, and that's dangerous. That's very dangerous. And I'm becoming more and more aware of just how dangerous that is. Yeah, wow. It's still a struggle.
Right.
I do want to make you feel comfortable
Right.
I want to say what you want to hear.
Right.
But that is so dangerous.
Right.
I'm little step by step getting to where
Good.
it's
Because
not.
you can lead somebody the wrong way.
Yes.
He's running into,
Yeah.
I'm not saying he led somebody the wrong way, but more with his daughter, you know, you don't want to make him mad. He's
Right.
stepping out and telling her the hard part of it, I mean, the honest part, you know, that's not always easy.
You know, like you said though, you don't realize how serious the situation is until you see what's going on here and what will happen if you don't.
Because that would be life or death in the long run.
Right.
His daughter.
Right.
That would be life or
Right.
death in the long run.
Okay. If Jairus hadn't have backed Jesus on this, so you got dear old Aunt Minnie, and she's just a dear family friend, but she's in part of this wailing and mourning group. And she says to Jairus after Jesus tries to kick them all out, Josh, you really going to let him kick us out of here like this?
Get out.
If he hadn't have backed her, what do you think would have happened? If Jairus hadn't have backed Jesus and said, you leave, I dare say Jesus would have left. Like, look, if you're not going to trust me to handle this thing in the way that I need to handle it, there's nothing I can do for you. So have fun. Enjoy. It's serious.
But you would think those people would kind of be on board because Jesus was already.
They just laughed him to scorn.
A bunch of miracles.
Yeah, they just.
Yeah, they went from wailing to laughing.
To wailing.
Yeah,
They're fickle.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure
No
that-
faith whatsoever. No faith whatsoever. I heard about a minister that had two different uncles on separate sides of the family. Both of them had lung cancer. So he's with the first uncle, and he sends him tapes, and he sends him verses, and he's trying to help him in this healing process. Well, the guy's almost on his deathbed, and the family are gathered there, and he's kind of in the living room, and this guy's in his bedroom, and he manages to crawl up out of bed, hanging on to the walls, and get around to the door facing, looks at the minister and says, I'm going to live and not die. And the minister just, yes, in my spirit, I know what you just said. I know what you just believed. You're going to make this. This thing's going to change. And the rest of the people in the room started saying, oh, it's gotten to his mind. It's making him speak crazy stuff. Well, he said, if that had been my house, I'd have started cleaning house right then and there. I'd have kicked some people out. I didn't have that authority in his house. He hadn't given me that authority. So the guy ended up recovering and went back to work. The uncle on the other side of the family, the minister sent him the same tapes, sent him the same confessions. He'd sit there and talk with him occasionally, and it sounded like he was talking good, talking the correct way, speaking words of faith, words of life. And it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And they called a little while later and said he died. It made him mad. He didn't like to lose. And in God, we don't have to lose. We know what we're doing and know how this operates. We don't have to lose. He always causes us to triumph. He's given us the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. He didn't like it. Anyway, as he started preparing for the funeral, he found out that some of the family members, after the minister was done talking with the uncle, after he left, the family members would come in and ask the uncle, so what kind of casket do you want? What songs do you want at your funeral?
There's people
Into his death. Yeah.
Well, what's the problem with that? Everything.
Well, it's to please them.
Or he's saying, I don't really believe that I'm going to live. That's not a only believe scenario. That's a, well, I'm going to talk like this, I'm going to talk like this, and we'll just see kind of what happens here.
Right.
That's not only believe.
Only belief would have been, I don't need a casket.
Correct, because I'm not dying.
Right.
Right. I'm going to live. I'm going to make it. I'm going to get out of this. Because he didn't do that, he ended up losing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one other note. He took all of his disciples with him. Notice that only 3 of them got to go inside. So even his own staff didn't get to go inside. Why did these 3 get picked? But the Bible didn't really say, but what I know is he knew where they were. He knew where their faith was. He knew that they weren't going to enter this situation. They were questioning this situation. They were going to be right there with him. Come on, Jesus. Let's see this. It's done. And then he gets up. He touches the lady. Now, what did he say at the beginning? If you lay your hand on her, she'll live. So what did Jesus do? He touched her. He laid his hand on her. She got up. She ended up living. So it was just like he said at the beginning, little detour in the way that this actually transpired, but he ended up seeing exactly what he said at the beginning. And then he gets up, or the girl gets up, and Jesus says, give her something to eat. What's going on here? This is the natural side of this miracle. She'd been dead. Her organs have rotted, had already started decomposing. So when Jesus touched her, he had to reverse the decomposition. He had to heal her or whatever caused her to die the first time, or she'd have died right away again. So both of those two things had to transpire. And now he's faced with the reality of, okay, her systems have been shut down now for a while. They need to be jump-started. They need to be kick-started here. Give her something to eat. Let these systems start back up. Let them get going again. Spiritual side, he took care of the healing. He took care of the redeeming from death. He took care of that. And then the natural side, give her to eat. And God will instruct you about both. Jairus had a journey to take in this process. He started the journey by saying, I'm going to declare the end from the beginning. And he didn't even realize that he was doing it. But he made the declaration that ended up being the end of the result. Faith always gives you the outcome before it happens. Faith always tells you what's going to happen in advance. He had an opportunity to be totally distracted, to be totally blown out of the water, to totally lose his faith, to lose his confession, and yield to fear in the middle of this. He passed the test. He had an opportunity to be offended at the woman taking time. He passed that test. They finally get to to Jairus' house, and Jesus kicks all the other people out of the room. So he has to deal with those family issues. He passed that test. They finally get in the room. Can you imagine his expression when they finally get in the room and he sees his cold daughter's body? This is the first time he's seen her. She might already be turning blue. Anyway, as a father looking down on your dead child for the first time, there's another opportunity for fear to grip him. Another opportunity for him to get all bent out of shape, for him to just lose it emotionally. What do you think held him together? The fact that Jesus had looked at him with those piercing eyes and said, we're going to fix this, only believe. Only believe. Not believe more than something else, only believe. And what was the end result? They got their daughter back. So what's the moral of the story? Number one, at the beginning, declare the end. Don't yield to fear. Even though you're afraid, don't yield to the fear. Yield to the worry. Don't yield to the concern. God's going to be up all night anyway. Let him do his thing. And you just rest. Is there anything you can do about it anyway? Probably not. Other than your words, other than keeping yourself in track with where you're going. But other than that, there's probably in the grand scheme of things, not a lot you can do about it. But God can do something about it. And he will, as long as we give him something to work with and we don't change our mind.